Thank you very much for your welcome and also for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here at this conference of the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy. Excellent forum, excellent speakers and audience. And I fully agree with its aims of promoting global peace through strengthening intercultural relationships. Some other voices at the same time. I will use that later on when I speak about polyphony. So that's yeah. I'd like to dive today into a possibility, a musical potential, I would say, of polyphony. To look into the possibilities of music itself as a medium to address all kinds of issues that have been discussed the last 2 days. Other speakers have excellently put forward many functions of music. We have talked about music as a community builder, as entertainment, and I like actually to use another word than entertainment. I like to use enjoyment. I think of all the uses of music, the central one is enjoyment. Also worship. It may be in the religious sense, but also in the sense of nationalism, and even in the sense of worship of persons. I think there are many love songs which are worshipping the beloved, so also there's a kind of worship, love worship. Then pedagogy. Music has been used for didactic purposes in many ways. And to give just one example, Plato, to refer to the former speaker speaking about Greece, Plato used music, had a use for music in a very important sense as a didactic means. And there's having written music, like for instance by Johann Sebastian Bach, which was first and foremost intended as didactic material for composers, for singers, for musicians to get a deeper feeling from music. So it's, I think, also an important use for music to keep in mind. And then emancipation. Ambassador Simoni has spoken about music as agency of change, freedom, and understanding. Also, this is, I think, an important function of music as emancipation. Actually, up to the first half of the 20th century, this was very much the aim of the avant-garde in Europe, like Stockhausen, Boulez. They thought of music as, first of all, the emancipation of human mind. And then I come to the other possibilities. Music as an intellectual achievement. This is not mentioned very often, but also this is has been, in the past at least, a very important function of music, especially in the 19th century, where music was emancipated as one of the major arts after the 18th century, that music was thought as subservient to language. But the 19th century saw music as an intellectual achievement as well. Of course, we should also mention what has been mentioned before, that music is very important to achieve and maintain emotional balance. So it's a very rich array of functions in music. And I think many of the great musics, they combine all these functions together. Today I'd like to discuss another possibility of thinking about music, that is music as a mode of thought and action, which transcends music as a field itself. So is it possible to find in music possibilities of ways of thinking which could be used in the political and social area as well, without maybe making music as a kind of way of approaching issues? And I'd like to discuss these possibilities as a mode of thought and action in intercultural and political perspective. And politics, I refer to the Greek origin of polis and politeia as a community of citizens, in this case worldwide, so inclusive. Politics worldwide and inclusive. When I'm talking about this, I assume that music is a shared competence of all human beings, and it is deeply rooted in our evolution. Like language, music is evolutionary, very important for survival. And this is maybe the bottom line of it, but there's also a kind of a perspective to work towards. Also to create a polis, a politeia, a community in the truly human sense. So the questions I like to address today is which models may music offer to us as a way of thinking and acting to create a truly human global community. Today and yesterday, many of the issues of present situation have been discussed. There has been expressed a doubt about multicultural society. It has been discussed in Germany and many other countries that the feasibility of this kind of society may not be very positive. On the other hand, has been said today even that tolerance is not enough. It's not a question of living aside together in tolerant ways. Emphasis has been led to take cultural diversity into account, pluralism, respect for difference. But on the other hand, the importance of integration and the value of reciprocity and complementarity. Also, we have heard discussions about the problem of friction, conflict, and even hatred between groups. And there we have to realize that hatred is the reverse side of love, in the sense that hatred has often as its root the longing to be recognized, to be seen, to be accepted. So in that sense also we have to think about possibilities of music as addressing strife and hatred as the reverse side of love. Per Ekkedal has spoken about wonderful projects of the Jeunesse Musicale, and we've seen groups from very different directions worldwide singing and playing together. And what struck me was that the line taken was that all these young people were singing the same kind of music at the same time, which gives, of course, a very strong feeling of community and of common strength. Very beautiful. I like to take another possibility in music, that's polyphony, which is people singing, making music in different ways at the same time. Different voices, different melodies, which may be very conflicting sometimes, but at the same time mutually attuned to each other. So polyphony as a model of thinking of our societies, which may address the issues I've just mentioned. Polyphony comes from Greek and means polis, means many, and phony from phonine sound, many voices sounding at the same time. In German, it's Mehrstimmigkeit, which means more voices being sung at the same time. And I'd like to develop it together with you into a kind of model concept of cultural polyphony, which is not the same as multiculturalism, as we will see in a minute. Also, I like to develop the idea of polyphony both as a cultural idea, but also as a personal idea, because we as persons are a reflection also of the cultures we are building. And I think in our days, we ourselves are multiple voices in ourselves, which we also have to learn to attune to each other. So when I speak about polyphony, it's about personal polyphony, but also as a cultural joint polyphony. I'm also very confident to enter this subject into discussion, because we find polyphony already all over the world. We find it in Central Africa, we find it in Polynesia, in Indonesia, we find it in Europe. So it's, I think, a human competence which is shared in different ways, realized in the world. I will give two examples in a minute about polyphony, because to make it more clear to you. But before I do that, I'd like to discern two main aspects of polyphony, of Mehrstimmigkeit, of multi-voiced music. One is the aspect of counterpoint. When you speak about multi-voiced music, you have different melodies at the same time. They can be sung, they can be played. It need to be vocal. And typically, they are different melodies which have different rhythm, different melody, different timbre sometimes, different dynamics among each other. So it's the contrapuntal, the counterpoint between voices. I think this is very important, and it shows respect for difference. So that's one thing to remember, the counterpuntal, the counterpoint aspect. Also, issues which have been mentioned earlier are very essential for counterpoint. That is complementarity. So voices, they fit into each other, but don't do the same things at the same time. They complement to each other. That's one aspect. The other aspect is how do those voices attune to each other? Because when we have different voices at the same time, this can easily amount to cacophony, to just a big noise at the same time. So polyphony needs also, apart from counterpoint, it needs a kind of attuning to each other, how to relate to each other. And then we have in music the notions of dissonance and consonance, so the tuning into a harmonic way, but also allowing space for clashes, for difference. So this morning was spoken about clashes of civilization. In music, this is fully accepted because it's a dynamic drive for music. Without clashes, music is not possible. So the clash is accepted and is actually played with in music, and is essential for the harmonic dimension, both consonant and dissonance, both agreement and conflict. The French composer Pierre Boulez has given a beautiful description of polyphony. He has called it mutual responsibility. The voices which build polyphony, could be our voices, are mutually responsible for each other's difference and for one's own difference. And the word responsibility derives from ability to respond. We should be able to respond to the other's voices and vice versa. So polyphony as a mentality of mutual responsibility. And as we will hear in the polyphonic music, each voice sounds different when playing and singing together from when they were played separately. Both voices are transforming each other. Musically, this can be explained through acoustics, for instance, that the basic pitches of voices which are singing and playing at the same time, they transform each other acoustically. Their overtones interfere. It's too difficult to explain at this moment, but you have noticed that you hear sometimes voices which are not actually played, but they arise from the interference between the actually played voices. And this is an unpredictable situation. So I'd like to give two examples of polyphony. The first one I've chosen from Central Java, from the gamelan performance. It's a very, very complex music of many different voices at the same time. And I've chosen an example from gamelan from a marriage ceremony, because like yesterday it was spoken about marriage as a beautiful occasion of union and unification. So I thought an example from marriage would be wonderful. I'll let her, I just ask Darius to play first a fraction of it, and then I will point out to you that each of the voices has a different history and has a different cultural background. It's a multicultural music which has come into one music as we now hear it now today in Central Java. Pity to fade out music, and it's like kind of violence. I'm sorry, we have to do it for time's sake. What we hear, as I said, is actually a universe of cultures at the same time. There's one part of the orchestra which is the bronze instrument, different kinds of gongs. You've heard the very high sounding gongs, but also the deep gongs, the large gongs. And this gong part of the gamelan orchestra is the oldest layer. It dates back to South Asian cultures, which have brought those instruments with them from the Bronze Age. It's still there as a layer in the orchestra, very important layer. Then we've heard the voices, the Psinden, and their music has been modeled through Indian influences and Arabic influences. Also, the whole terminology, musical theory of Java is full of Sanskrit terms of Hindu background. Also, the stories are from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata very often. Then there's the rabab, the stringed instrument, the bowed instrument, is from Arabic descent, from Saudi Arabia. So many, many layers which date from different centuries in the past, and also have different cultural backgrounds. So it's kind of plural cultural music, a cultural polyphony that we hear actually in the gamelan music today. I've been playing myself the gamelan for many years, and I also found that it's also a polyphony of abilities. When you start as a musician, there are some parts you can play immediately, very simple parts like the balungan, the central melody. For other parts, you have to train for many years. So there's also a multi-ability polyphony. You can start immediately, but also sometimes you have to learn for years. Also in that sense, it's a layered polyphony in terms of competence and abilities. So this is just an example of the kind of music that I like to transport later on today as a way of thinking, and beyond music in the narrow sense. Second example, since we are in Germany, I also brought music by Bach, a German composer. It's from Das Orgelbüchlein, the little organ booklet, which contains chorale preludes. And we will hear a piece for organ, which is played with both hands and 2 feet. So already the body is employed in this music in a kind of polyphonic way. Each of the members has a different part to play. And the sons of Bach called their father omnibus membris rhythmicus. He was rhythmical in every single member of his body. There are 3 main layers. One is a very fluid melody, which is derived from Italian practice from that time. The middle part is derived from the 16th century, which 2 centuries earlier from Bach's time. It's the chorale melody. And there's the feet, which play a different part, which is derived from northern Germany organ playing. So there are 3 different layers, 3 different histories, and 3 different cultural regions within Europe. Because Italy, Spain, France, Germany built at that time different cultures within Europe, which are integrated in the music by Johann Sebastian Bach. Person. So all the parts of the body has to do different things. So you become yourself a polyphonic being, so to speak, which you can also transmit to others in that way. So I like also always to make the reference between culture and the personal aspects, the polyphonic being, the polyphonic identity, and polyphonic society. The idea of polyphony, of multi-voiced music, has been used as a metaphor by many philosophers already in the past, and other scholars. And I just select two of them. One of them is Michal Bakhtin, a literature scholar from Russia. He has used the notion of polyphony for literature, for instance, for Dostoevsky's novels. And he considers each of the main figures of Dostoevsky as a voice, as his own voice, which is interfering with other voices in the same novel. And there are two terms I think I like to discuss in this context. One is difficult to pronounce, but I do my best. He says these voices within the novel of Dostoevsky, as a metaphor, of course, are characterized by unfinalizability. You cannot finalize those voices. They are open. They are undefined in terms because they are always interfering and relating to other voices. So they are never finished. They are never complete. They're unfinalizable. I think it's very important in terms of polyphony. We can also experience this in listening. I've been playing the piece, both gamelan and also the organ piece I've been playing. But every time you play or hear them, you hear new things. They are inexhaustible, so to speak, unfinalizable voices. We could also use it as a metaphor for cultural contributions. And the other aspect he mentions is relationality. There's no voice without other voices. You have to tune to each other. Otherwise, you cannot make music, no polyphonic music. This is how he sees the issue of polyphony in relation to literature. What I find also very interesting is that he relates polyphony to truth, to the notion of what is true. And I quote, he says, truth, what is true, is not limited to a single voice, but always to a multiplicity of voices. Truth is an ensemble of statements which may well be logically inconsistent and contradictory. So truth is not one statement, but more than one, which may be well in conflict with each other. And he says truth is only possible to express itself through multiplicity of voices. And this requires a listening attitude of those who are involved in truth. A second application of polyphony as a metaphor for music to general thinking is by Edward Said, the Palestinian, Egyptian, American scholar of literature. You may know his work. He has written a very famous book on Orientalism in 1978. Pardon? Edward Said. Yeah. Maybe you know that he was also very much engaged into music. He was a piano player himself, an excellent piano player. And together with Daniel Barenbaum, he instigated the West Eastern Divan Orchestra. And this is how he applied the notion of polyphony to the description of himself as a personality. He describes himself as a polyphonic composition. And I quote from his book, Out of Place, so Edward Said, I occasionally experience myself as a cluster of flowing currents. I prefer this to the idea of a solid self, the identity to which so many attach so much significance. By the way, he detested the word identity, Edward Said. He saw human beings and culture as a cluster of flowing currents. And I continue, these currents, like the themes of one's life, flow along during the waking hours, and at their best, they require no reconciling, no harmonizing. So again, conflict is there in music as a very essential dynamic force. And I continue, they are off and maybe out of place, but at least they are always in motion, in time, in place, in the form of all kinds of strange combinations moving about, not necessarily forward, sometimes against each other, in counterpoint, yet without a central theme. A form of freedom, I'd like to think, even if I'm far from being totally convinced that it is. With so many dissonances in my life, I've learned actually to prefer being not quite right and out of place. So he describes himself as a musical polyphonic composition, full of voices which are trying to attune to each other without reaching a finite harmony. And this is the way he used also to analyze novels, not as a single line of argument, but as a multiple line of argument. So like Joseph Conrad, The Heart of Darkness, for instance, he reads them as a polyphonic composition. And voices which have not been heard, which have been suppressed even in the past, he brings out to the fore. It's a really beautiful work, and I would recommend you to read, for instance, Culture and Imperialism by Edward Said, as an application of a musical notion of polyphony to literature and to thought and to analysis of imperialism and colonialism. I'd like now to give two examples of my own work engaging in this kind of thinking, of polyphonic thinking. But before I do so, I'd like to mention two aspects which I think may be interesting for discussion. That is the idea of Karl Popper that we have the ability as human beings to transfer our conflicts from the battlefield to discussion, to thought. And he has pointed to science as a very important means in human evolution to leave the battlefields and to have battles in intellectual thought, intellectual exchange. And I think also music can serve in the same way, as Karl Popper intended, that the whole idea of multiculturalism, etc., being not working, integration and these kind of things, could be realized in music provisionally in a much more convincing way before we enter into the actual fighting in politics. So music could be used as a kind of playground in a very positive sense, also because I said music is joyful, to prepare us, to make us sensitive to dealing with the important questions that I mentioned in the beginning. To which I should add that polyphony, as I've discussed it, is very different from multiculturalism, because it's not of voices standing beside each other, but completely always interacting and transforming each other, changing each other. Mutual attuning, as I said. There's full room for dissonance and strife and conflict and clashes even, because there's the dynamism of making the music move forward. So this I like to bring forward that music could offer a mode of thought, a kind of intelligence, a kind of sensitivity, which could help us to deal with very important questions that are confronting us today. Doing it joyfully, respecting difference, and also enjoying and taking responsibility for one's own and one's other's difference. Two examples of my own practice to conclude. One is a famous story from Arabic, Iranian, Turkish descent, called in different languages, Laila-Majnun in Iranian. It's called in Arabic, Keiswa Laila, or Majnun Laila, and in Turkish, Majnun ile Laila. It's a love story like Romeo and Juliet. It's between two lovers which cannot reach each other because of clefts between the clans. And we did a performance in different languages, different poets. One of them was Nizami. It's a Persian poet who wrote a beautiful epos on Laila-Majnun. Other one was Rumi, Mevlana Rumi. He was mentioned yesterday by our Turkish colleague. He's not here, I think. Rumi. He has also very often written in his works about Laila-Majnun. They are the epitome of love against all odds. There are also texts by Juan de la Cruz, the mystic from Spain, because we wanted to find within different religious and literary traditions common base. And I think that in mysticism, the common base is much easier found than in exoteric religious practices. This is an extract from it, and you will see a performance by a Syrian singer, tenor, also playing the qanun. It's a kind of zither-like instrument. He will sing a text in Arabic by a poet called Majnun. It means the mad one, who one's mad with love, mad with Laila. By the way, Laila means night, from Lail, Arabic night, and night as the place of meeting between lovers. The other player is a cello player. Bassem al-Ghori is the Syrian singer. Cello player is Eduard van Rechteren-Altena. And is a dancer, a break dancer from Iraq. He takes the part of Majnun on the stage. Musically, I should add that it's a polyphony between a framework like in Schubert's sonata in B flat major, which has a rhythmical, melodic accompaniment covering the different octaves of the piano. That's used for the cello. And the melodic part is sung by the Syrian singer and played on the qanun. And this is derived from maqams, the melody types from the Arabic traditions. I was very interested by hearing the term from Per Ekedal, horizontal learning. Actually, we use the same term, at least similar term, use the term mutual learning. So the maqam tradition was learned to me by Bassem al-Ghori, and on my turn I learned him the different possibilities of Western polyphony. So we learned each other in that sense, and also the dancer taught us certain movements which are essential to portray Majnun. So let's look at the DVD. It's in. Oh no, is it in? Loaded, is it? No? Oh, I have it. I have it also. Apart from just 1 second. No, that's not one. There's not one. It's the other one. This one. It's performed at the Poetry International Festival in Rotterdam, which was devoted to the story of Laila-Majnun last year in June. And many poets from all over the world recited poems about this famous love couple. The text, because we are preparing the text is in Arabic, as I said. In the 8th century, there was a poet, a legendary poet called Majnun in Hijaz area in Saudi Arabia. And he composed very passionate poems about his beloved, which he couldn't reach. In this case, he's in the desert because his parents, or the parents of Laila, forbid him to come near her. So that's it. He retired into the desert. So that's lights, please.
Peace of my soul, where are you?
Qanun. The maqam Hijazi, which portrays longing for the beloved one.
أحلى
Writing the name of Laila, the dancer.
Laila, Laila, oh Laila, 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 طائرا كان في صدري دعا باسمي ليلى 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 أسكن الله عينه وليلى بأرض الشام في بلد كفري.
This is Makam Sabha, which is also blowing, but a more sad kind of blowing than the other one. Laila-Majnun. One final example is okay? I'm very happy that just a moment ago, Mr. Spiros Mercouris mentioned the cultural capitals of Europe. He's not here anymore. In 1985, Athens, like he mentioned, was the first capital of Europe. And there we met a beautiful sarangi player, a stringed instrument from India, called Dhruba Ghosh, from the Ghosh family of musicians from Bengal, later on Bombay. And at that moment, 85, culture Europe, capital of Europe, we may have conceived already the idea of cooperating into a polyphony of our backgrounds of Indian and of contemporary Western music. And this was realized actually in 2009 in Chennai, in Madras, in India, at a festival. And as a theme, we had the famous male-female balance in Hinduism between Shiva and Shakti. Maybe interesting for you to notice that in India, the active principle, the energetic principle is female, is Shakti, and the passive principle, the contemplative principle is male, is Shiva. And together they form one whole. They're always, the divinity is always double. It's always male-female. It's never only male, never only female. You often see statues in India of Shiva and Shakti as half female figures. Maybe when you have the opportunity to go to Bombay and go by boat to Elephanta Island, has anyone visited Elephanta? There's beautiful caves, and you may remember that's in the caves of Shiva statues, there's one half male, half female. It's called Ardhanareshwara. This is what our project is about, male-female balance. And in India, there are melodic patterns called ragas, some of which are connected with Shiva, some of which are connected with Shakti. And we combined two ragas into one to portray this male-female tension, but also balance and also unification, so to speak. Two instruments. One sarangi, it's the bowed lute. Second one, you find them also in Pakistan, for instance, sarangi. And the second instrument is a Western instrument, the alto hobo, the English horn, large hobo, played by Ernest Rombout. And both of them play completely into their own traditions. They don't, imitate each other, but they relate to each other through the same ragas, but keep to their own traditions, but attune to each other in ways of phrasing and these kind of things. Shall we play? That's the last example. Shiva Shakti by Dhruba Ghosh and Ernest Rombout, English horn and sarangi. I have it. Let's go. Okay. Take the beginning. Just. You just hear the beginning of. This is the sarangi, Dhruba Ghosh and English horn. So to conclude, is a proposal to think about polyphony as a model of thought for interaction, featuring a plurality of voices which are mutually responsible for each other and attuned to each other. And can be used as a schooling to participate in a polyphonic world of mutual responsibility. Thank you very much.